The coronavirus pandemic swept almost the entire territory of planet Earth in 2020. COVID-19 divided the human life to before and after. What's happening now in different countries of the world? Did we manage to adapt to the new reality? What is the world like during quarantine? All this in the program Stop COVID. China. How did citizens of the Celestial Empire first meet the outbreak of coronavirus, and how did they manage to defeat it? New technologies are widely used in the fight against the pandemic. Malaysia is trying to prevent the environmental consequences of the pandemic.
A few hundred thousands of bottles just being thrown away every year. It's crazy.
How do the governments of these countries fight the pandemic, and how do ordinary people experience it? The second wave through the eyes of our reporters and local residents in the new episode of the Stop COVID program. Hello, my name is Batagos Sirgabayeva. I'm in the capital of China, Beijing. At the end of January and February, the streets of the city of 21 million people were practically empty. This was due to the Chinese New Year. However, the main reason was a new virus which was discovered at the end of December in Wuhan, Hubei province. The number of those infected grew rapidly. If on January 23rd, Wuhan had about 500 patients with coronavirus, then a week later this figure increased 10 times. More than 40,000 doctors from other provinces arrived in Wuhan to fight the epidemic. Mobile hospitals were built in the city, one of which was built in 10 days. In Beijing, the situation was more stable, but there were not enough masks and sanitizers. If they appeared somewhere, they were sold out instantly. The pharmacist replied, everything was taken to Wuhan. This is how the locals remember those days. There were no people on the streets, no cars. It was empty. There was fear. It took an effort to improve the situation. Now the streets are full of people and cars. Life is restored. At the very beginning, people in Beijing were worried. Everything was closed. However, the situation was brought under control. It took about 2 months for the country's authorities to curb the sharp increase of the novel coronavirus in Wuhan and Hubei province. The city has been quarantined for more than 70 days. Nothing worked except pharmacies and grocery stores. Areas with cases of the disease were completely isolated. Products were delivered by special services. For the rest, the rule was one family member can go out once every 2 days for 2 hours for essential goods. By the way, this rule was applied during an outbreak in a border town in the northeast of the country. What else helped China cope with the outbreak?
что же еще помогло Китаю справиться со вспышкой эпидемии?
它的整个控制力度还是比较大的。然后呢，再加上这个我们中国吧，就是。
The government did a great job. At the very start, the authorities took the situation under control. Institutions at various levels worked in cohesion. There were many volunteers. People wore masks, were tested for COVID-19. People also took the responsibility.
责任也落实到人了，所以我觉得这个是我们中国这个疫情比较，得到有效控制的一个手段吧。
就大家都非常积极的这个。
People self-isolated, wore masks. Each person did it consciously. The right policy also helped. Medicine in China is at high level. The clinics are well equipped. The testing of population is well organized. I think all this helped China to quickly cope with the epidemic.
检测啊，什么那个医院那边也到位了，然后所以就非常好。
Wuhan was opened only in April when for a certain time there were no new cases of COVID-19. In parallel with the fight against the epidemic, the authorities began to help out small and medium-sized businesses, which is about 60% of Chinese economy. Therefore, the country's authorities urged landlords to reduce rents for entrepreneurs, bank lowered interest rates on loans, businessmen were exempt from taxes and social security payments.
Сразу, как только объявили о этом вирусе, как только люди начали знать об этом.
I work at a restaurant. We were the first one to get a hit from the virus. Naturally, it was time of great losses. From the very first day, the restaurant was empty. The workers didn't want to work. As a result, we were closed for some time. It was hard. But in China, they took preemptive measures and quickly took the situation under control. And by April, we saw some improvements.
Смогли предотвратить, взять под контроль, и уже к апрелю улучшения какие-то пошли.
Now mainly imported cases are registered in China. People are free to travel around the country, except in high and medium risk areas. Today, there is only one such zone, the city of Qingdao in the east of the country. The situation there was immediately taken under control. Mass testing of the population was carried out. In general, until the approval of the vaccine, the Celestial Empire considers this measure as the most effective. In Beijing, during the pandemic, a mini program, the so-called health code, appeared. It must be shown at the entrance to any premises: pharmacies, shops, markets, office buildings, and subway. Recently, the program was modified. Now, when entering any object, you need to scan its QR code. This way, it records your movements. After a trip to another city, you must fill in your travel places. New technologies are widely used in the fight against the pandemic. With the help of big data, contacts of patients are found very quickly. For example, during June outbreak in Beijing, the Xinfei market became the source of infection. Then in a couple of days, 200,000 people who had visited the market over the past 14 days were found. Even those who were just passing by in a car or in the subway were called. By the way, due to the outbreak, when the virus was found on the cutting boards where important salmon was caught, this type of fish vanished for a long time. All the products were strictly checked. After the outbreak of the pandemic, food products were strictly checked at the markets. We do not sell important products. Although it was allowed to walk without masks in places with a small crowd of people in Beijing, many people are in no hurry to take it off. You need to wear masks outdoors, especially in crowded places. Now there are still imported cases. It's not so safe. These vans can be seen at every residential yard or office building. They deliver online purchases to people. Due to the coronavirus epidemic in China, online commerce has flourished. Live streaming sales are especially popular.
Customer can say, I want to see the inside of the bag. Show me how many zippers there are. That is beyond anybody could have imagined 5 years ago.
This way was possible to support, for example, the province of Hubei. On the first day of the announcement of such sales in April, the region earned about $2.5 million. Now the country's authorities are focusing on consumption as one of the main points of economic growth. A second wave is expected in China, and they're ready for it. The number of COVID-19 testing laboratories, as well as the number of beds, has been increased across the country. At the same time, strict quarantine in the infected zones is still relevant. In Malaysia, the first cases of COVID-19 were reported in early January 2020. Then the virus was brought in by tourists from China and Singapore. At the end of February, a religious conference for 16,000 participants was held in one of the mosques of Kuala Lumpur, as a result of which more than 600 people were infected. 2 weeks later, the strictest quarantine regime was introduced in the country, which lasted 54 days. My name is Ekaterina, and I've been following the development of the epidemiological situation in Kuala Lumpur since the first days of quarantine. At the time, residents were forbidden to go outside without a valid reason, and if there was one, only one family member could go out and strictly wearing a mask. The valid reasons list included a trip to work, pharmacy, the grocery store. Traffic was closed not only between states and cities, but also between different neighborhoods of the city. The police checked each car and asked for the purpose of the trip. There was a curfew in Kuala Lumpur from 8 p.m. until the morning. At the time of quarantine, a total of 790 cases were identified. The virus outbreak was stopped thanks to immediate response and strict preventive measures. Until the end of summer, the number of new cases hovered around 30 cases per day for the entire country of 30 million. Despite the relaxation of preventive measures since mid-May, the registration procedure and the observance of the distance, both in public spaces and in apartment buildings, remain mandatory.
Как в общественных пространствах, так и в многоквартирных домах.
Malaysian authorities allocated significant funds for the economic support of businesses and the population. According to international consulting agencies, as of September 2020, the total financial assistance fund amounted to $73.5 billion. The money was used for humanitarian assistance to vulnerable groups of the population, as well as benefits for the sick, students, and retirees.
В Малайзии был введен ряд налоговых послаблений как для физических, так и для юридических.
In Malaysia, a number of tax breaks were introduced for both individuals and legal entities. For example, in 2020, tax deductions of up to $70,000 are due to companies that decide to make repairs or upgrade equipment in production. Public funds are used to finance microcredit, job preservation, and retraining programs for employees most affected by layoffs.
От сокращений.
In Malaysia, the SME sector is quite affected a lot, especially we do a lockdown. So the business is going drop between 60 to 70%. The government is doing a good job. They do a BPN for the individually and also for the MSC, the local small business. So they give like a moratorium to hold the stock the payment to the bank, and also they give incentive like a bond to make the businessmen start again the business. Our restaurant has been closed for around 1.5 months. Okay, then after that we open back. We need to reduce the seating capacity from 120 packs to 60. So meaning around 50%. We need to reduce in terms of the social distance 2 meters between each table.
While hotels and restaurants are empty, revenues in the ready-to-eat meals delivery market have grown by almost 1.5 times. Today, more than 20% of Malaysians order food delivery to their homes on an ongoing basis. But, as if often the case, what is good for the economy is bad for the environment. In neighboring Singapore, every day of quarantine, 6 million citizens of the country throw out 26 tons more of used food packaging than before. Non-recyclable plastic containers, along with used face masks and sanitizer bottles, end up being washed into the South China Sea and carried by currents across the world's oceans.
И затем разносится течением по всему мировому океану. По оценкам экологов, в связи с пандемией...
According to the environmentalists, due to the pandemic, the total volume of plastic in Southeast Asia increased by 30%, while in large cities, such as Bangkok, this figure reached 60% in the first month of quarantine. While many types of plastics are theoretically recyclable, recycling food packaging has low margins and is therefore unattractive to contractors. As for medical masks, once in the water, they do not decompose, but disintegrate into microparticles of polypropylene, which ends up in our drinking water.
Оседают в том числе и в нашей питьевой воде.
People in Malaysia who are concerned about health and the environment shop in stores of unpackaged goods. Here you can buy food and hygiene products in your own container, as well as purchase reusable face masks. The market quickly adjusted to new realities, and now not only vegetable oil or shampoo is sold here, but also hand sanitizer.
For an average use in the pharmacy for a 50 ml bottle is about 20 times usage. So imagine using that a few times a day. So you're using about 4 bottles a month. And then about 40 to 50 bottles a year. Times that by the amount of people in Malaysia, you're gonna get like a few hundred thousands of bottles just being thrown away every year. It's crazy. You just need to buy a bottle one time, and then you can just refill it many times after that. And it's so much cheaper.
Buying a hand sanitizer in your own container has a positive effect on the environment and on your own wallet. This also applies to reusable masks.
The reports now, they are saying like there's 10 million disposable face masks that's thrown away every day. So imagine if like just a few of us just started using reusable face masks, we can just cut that number down by so much.
As with the rest of the world, Malaysians are eagerly waiting for a vaccine and reconsidering the lessons of the pandemic. Due to the second wave, schools and kindergartens are closed again, playgrounds are fenced off. For young children, in contrast to adults, a year in complete or partial isolation is 20-30% or even half of their life. One can only guess how this will affect the worldview of children and their tired parents. Only one thing can be unequivocally stated. By thinking well and drawing conclusions for ourselves, we can become more resistant to similar challenges in the future.
Мы сможем стать устойчивее к подобным катаклизмам в будущем.
The pandemic has introduced some small and at the same time colossal adjustments into human life, forcing us to adapt to new conditions. In each country, it happens in its own way. Life in the era of COVID, watch new reports from different countries in our next episodes.